It's the fundamental difference between Sith and Jedi. The Sith are all about attainment, achievement, power, significance. The Jedi are all about a state of being in the here and now.
You're listening to Path of the Jedi with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this amazing journey. Well, at least it's amazing for me. I hope it's as amazing for you as it is for me. But our goal here is to bring you guys a new message, a new lesson that we take from Star Wars that you can use in your day-to-day life. So let's just get right into it. Let's kick it off with news and updates. For our first piece of news that I wanted to share with you guys, officially, as of this recording, we are at 300 downloads. Actually, just a little bit above 300, but yeah, it's super, super exciting. Last week, we hit 200. We actually hit 250 over the weekend, and again, as of this recording, we're just a little bit over 300. I'm so excited for this, guys. It really means a lot to me that you guys are not only just listening, but continue to listen and continue to share and pass on the podcast with people. It says to me that you guys are getting value of it, and like I've mentioned in the past, that just makes me want to work harder for you guys to continue to provide you guys good content. So again, thank you so much for helping us hit this milestone, and we'll continue to celebrate milestones down the road. Next milestone really that we're after is the 500 mark. So help us get to the 500 mark. Now, speaking of that, I usually save this portion of the news and updates towards the end, but I want to do it up front here and do the shout outs, right?
I'm going in. Cover me, Porkins.
So for this week's shout out, I would like to recognize Jay DeLeon and my sister, Marianne DeLeon, my brother-in-law and my sister. These two have been amazing the past few weeks. Super, super supportive of the podcast. They've been loving it. They've been, letting me know how much they love it and how much they appreciate the content. They've gone out and shared it with people, shared it with their friends. They're texting people that they know. They're sharing it on their social feeds. So, I wanted to follow up the announcement that we've hit over 300 downloads with this shout out because you guys have been a huge, huge part of helping get us to 300. So thank you guys so much. Again, shout out to Jay and Marianne DeLeon. Now, if you have somebody that you'd like to give a shout out to, I would love to do that for you here on Path of the Jedi podcast. Just send an email to info@pathofthejedi.com with the subject heading shout out. In the email, let me know who you want to give a shout out to and what your message is. Again, the email is info@pathofthejedi.com.
Classified, really? Me too. Big secret.
All right, the next piece of news and update is I want to celebrate Yoli Global. That's right. Yoli Global is my network marketing company that I'm a part of, that I have been a part of for the last 12 years. We just had our 12th annual convention. Well, actually, now that I think about it, it's only our 11th. We had to skip last year. And so that's why this year was even that much more special. I wanted to bring up Yoli Global for a few reasons that I think are pertinent to this particular context with us here at Path of the Jedi. Number one, we just released a new line of products in a category that's never been done before in network marketing, herbal tinctures that will help you change your mood. Now, why do I bring this up? I bring this up because I'm a huge proponent and advocate for mental health and mental health awareness. Our products, these new all-natural herbal tinctures, will help you change your mood when you need it, can help you change your mood actually instantaneously if you need it, and also has long-term benefits for things like helping you reduce stress in the long term and helping you build your resilience. So this is really, really important from a mental health standpoint because of everything that we're all facing right now, right? But whatever the stresses that might be, whatever pressures that we might be feeling in our lives, whatever anxieties we might be experiencing right now, we have all natural herbal tinctures that can help you address those things both in the short term and the long term. So this is incredibly important work. It's an incredibly important line of products, and yeah, well, we're the first to release these things in the network marketing space. So that's number one. Number two, our keynote speaker for this past weekend was actually an individual by the name of Shawn Achor. I say Achor, some people say Acre, but he's the author of a book called The Happiness Advantage. And if you haven't read this, I highly, highly encourage you to read this book. He talks about some of the things I just mentioned when it comes to happiness, when it comes to resilience and being able to deal and face the things that we all face on a day-to-day life, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Shawn Achor through the course of this episode. But if you want to pick up and read Shawn Achor's book, again, it's Happiness Advantage. I'll leave the link down in the show notes. I highly, highly, highly encourage you to pick up that book. I listened to it on Audible, on audio, a handful of years back, and really it's made a huge difference in my perspective and how I see things. So again, the book is called The Happiness Advantage. It's by Shawn Achor. Okay, so for our last piece of news and updates, and I literally just saw this morning, the new poster for the Book of Boba Fett dropped. It is amazing. The poster looks so badass. You can go check it out at our Twitter. I shared it on our Twitter page, at POTJ Podcast. It's freaking amazing, guys. It's amazing. Now, I know for us Star Wars fans, the Book of Boba Fett has been highly, highly anticipated. The series itself is going to be available on December 21st, so it's a nice little Christmas/New Year's present to all of us Star Wars geeks from Lucasfilms. Again, check out the poster. I shared it on our Twitter page at POTJ Podcast. And that does it for news and updates. All right, now in this episode, we are going to attempt to talk about the monumental topic of attachment in Star Wars. There's lots to talk about with this particular topic, so I am most definitely going to need to do this in multiple episodes. For those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with the concept of attachment in Star Wars, the Jedi Order, one of the main principles that they live by is non-attachment when it comes to love and relationships and when it comes to possession. Now, arguably, their attachment to this interpretation of non-attachment is what led to their downfall, but that alone requires a whole episode on itself to talk about. For our purposes, we are going to talk about relationships and possessions, but I want to hold off on that until the next episode because there are a couple of other aspects of attachment that we need to build on first before we get to those things. Number one, attachment to meanings and definitions, especially in the context of things you can't control. And number two, attachment to outcomes. All right, let's start with the first one, meanings and definitions, especially in the context of things that you cannot control. If we look at Anakin Skywalker, it would seem that his entire life's journey is a series of events completely out of his control, right? When we're first introduced to him in Phantom Menace, he was enslaved. He is then subsequently freed, but taken away from his mother and grows up in a completely foreign environment. And then immediately after that, his mentor, the person that saved him, gets murdered. And from then on, for the rest of his life, he became the subject of manipulation by Palpatine. Now we have to pose the question, is Anakin a victim or could things have gone a completely different way? Now, of course, things happen the way they're supposed to happen, and that's a completely different conversation outside of what we're talking about here. What I'm trying to say is that had Anakin been more aware of his own thoughts, the meanings and definitions that he was creating around the situations of his life, I think things could have gone a completely different way for him. But because he kept buying into the meanings and definitions that Palpatine were feeding him, he became more attached to those meanings and definitions. And because he became more attached to those things, he became more and more manipulable. Understand that the things that happened to Anakin, his life events, are completely neutral, as it is for all of us. And it's the meanings and definitions that he ascribed to those life events that determined how he reacted and therefore determines the outcomes throughout the course of his life. Meanings and definitions, or truths, for those of you guys who have listened to episode 4 from a few weeks back, these things reside in one place and one place only, and that's the space between our ears. And the more we become aware of this, the more purposeful and intentional we can be in creating our own outlook. And if we do that, we can be more purposeful and intentional with our responses. We can be more responsive as opposed to being reactive. The vicious manipulative cycle that Palpatine perpetrated on Anakin was in feeding him the lie that he could control things that were actually completely out of his control. And every time Anakin tried, things would go sideways. And then every time things went sideways, Palpatine re-fed him some more lies and some more false meanings. And round it went. Anakin got more and more attached to the idea that he could control things that he actually couldn't control, leading to his inevitable turning to the dark side. So, there are 2 lessons we can learn from this. Number 1, if we approach the things that happen to us in life from a neutral standpoint, we can then be more intentional and purposeful with the meanings we ascribe to those life events. And therefore, we can be more intentional and purposeful with being more happy and fulfilled moment to moment, because the moment's all we have. Number 2, ultimately, there's nothing outside of us that we can control. Other people's decisions, the things that happen to us. What we can control is exactly what number 1 said, the meanings and the definitions, the truths we tell ourselves about the events in our lives. And ultimately, this helps us be more purposeful and intentional behind the choices we make, allowing us to be more responsive as opposed to being reactive. And it's this process that actually helps us create better outcomes in our lives, inside out as opposed to outside in. As much as possible, approach each situation as a blank slate, and that leaves you free to beautifully create whatever outcome you want to create. And that leads us to the second topic that I wanted to cover today, attachment to outcomes. And before I go on, I want you guys to know, in case you hear any background noise, the landscape guys are here. They're working on the yard as I record this. Also, if you happen to notice any differences in my voice on this episode, it's because I'm still recovering from the weekend, from all the cheering and yelling and laughing that we did at our convention in Salt Lake City. So apologies in advance for any discrepancies or changes in vocal quality and background noise. Attachment to outcome is an interesting thing for me because as a coach and mentor, it's something that people come to me to help them achieve, right? To help them achieve new and different outcomes in their lives. And so it may lead you to the question, why is attachment to an outcome a bad thing? Well, in the case of Anakin, it's exactly these things that we've been talking about today that led him to the dark side. Emperor Palpatine, or at the time Chancellor Palpatine, kept dangling this carrot in front of him, saying that you can have this, you can have this, you can have this, and I will tell you how to get it. And that's how he kept continually being manipulated. It never really mattered how much Anakin achieved or accomplished. Palpatine was always going to dangle something in front of him to chase. And that's the thing about outcomes. You might be able to achieve certain things, but there's always another carrot. Now, I'm not saying that having goals and outcomes that you want to achieve, visions in your life, I'm not saying that that's wrong. Our cybernetic brains need targets. They need goals to aim for. They need input. They need direction. Having goals and a vision and outcomes that you want to achieve does exactly that. It gives your brain a target. However, the biggest lie that Palpatine perpetrated with Anakin was in convincing him that happiness and fulfillment rested in his achievement of those outcomes. I'll be happy when I achieve this. I'll be happy when I attain that. We attach our happiness to some far-off event or far-off circumstance. And in the meantime, our here and now, we're miserable. And even if we happen to be able to arrive at our desired destination, arrive at our desired outcome, once we get there, we often realize that we're still not happy. And you know what happens? We get back on the path of chasing another carrot. Early on in my network marketing career, I was miserable. I was so incredibly unhappy. And I had ascribed the meaning of that unhappiness. I had attached that unhappiness to my circumstances because I was broke, because I was limited with the things I can do in my life. I told myself that once I achieved success in my business, once I achieved financial freedom in network marketing, then I would be happy. And you know what? Maybe I was able to use and leverage that unhappiness, that misery into driving me to succeed in this business. But once I got there, once I achieved massive success and became one of the top earners in the entire company, I realized that I was still unhappy. And in fact, I fell deeper and deeper into depression, one of the deepest depressions I've ever experienced in my life that lasted for years. So that's the inherent danger of being attached to an outcome that could realistically lead you further and further into the dark side. It's the fundamental difference between Sith and Jedi. The Sith are all about attainment, achievement, power, significance. The Jedi are all about a state of being in the here and now. So yes, having goals, having desired outcomes, creating new visions for yourself is very, very important. Again, your brain needs it. Your brain needs a target. I set new visions and new goals for myself all the time. In fact, I have a whole new set of visions that I've got lined up for myself that are pushing me beyond what I currently thought I was capable of. And that's awesome. Setting a destination helps you appreciate and enjoy the journey. As cliche as it sounds, you have to enjoy the journey because it's on the journey that you become who you need to become in order to get to where you want to go. And if you don't believe me, read the book, The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. In his book and in the talk that he gave over the weekend at our event, he cited research that proved scientifically people who live with more joy and happiness actually are more productive and therefore have better results and outcomes in their lives. It's scientific. So set new visions for yourself. Create new goals, create new outcomes with the understanding that it isn't the destination that will give you happiness and joy, but that it's all about who you become along the way. And that it's the meanings and definitions that we choose to attach to the experiences that we're having in the here and now that actually give us the joy and the fulfillment and the happiness that ultimately will actually lead us to getting closer and closer to our goals and destinations and outcomes. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Wow. And the funny thing is, guys, we're just scratching the surface of this topic, attachment in the Star Wars universe. So we'll continue talking about attachment in the next episode. Until then, guys, if you have any questions, comments, reflections on what we covered today, please, absolutely, I want you guys to reach out. Hit me with an email with the topic of today's episode in the subject heading. You can either write me a message or send me an MP3. I would love to play your MP3 with your thoughts on today's episode. Of course, you can also reach out and connect with us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/POTJ podcast or Twitter @POTJ podcast. Beyond that, thank you guys again for tuning in to Path of the Jedi podcast. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure for me to be hanging out with you here today. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe. And yeah, well, if you haven't rated and reviewed, I'd really appreciate that as well. But if not, no big deal. You guys are all amazing. Thank you so much. Be well, be safe, and may the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.